Hello and welcome everyone. I'm so excited for this healing story today with Andrew Jahn. I'm super excited because you have some very unique ways or things that you tried for yourself on your healing journey, and also because you have been misdiagnosed, and I think so many people can relate with how that affects their life when they've been misdiagnosed and struggles with that. So I'm really excited to learn from you and have you share the insights and your story with us. So thank you so much for making time today for us.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. I'm really excited to be sharing. I know these stories are super helpful. I binge watched these stories when I was first going into my recovery journey, so I'm happy to kind of add to the catalog.
Oh wow. Isn't that beautiful when we notice the progress, knowing this was helpful for me then and now I'm actually the person sharing. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's like being because I'm a teacher, right? Like when I'm teaching students that are at a level I used to be, it's always so exciting. It's like, oh, I remember when I was learning this thing for the first time, and I
Yeah.
was the same age as you, and so there's something about it, like helping people along where we used to
Yeah.
be. It's really, yeah.
Yes, it's beautiful. So would you like to share a little bit with us what your life looked like when you were still when you were struggling, when you first found out, or when you realized something's not right with me? Maybe I do need to reach out for help. I can't do this alone. What was that time like? What were perhaps your symptoms or your ways of coping with all these emotional challenges or that you may have?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I was a teenager, it was much more difficult. I started feeling, but mental health wasn't really well known within my system, so I didn't really know that there were mental health issues. So when I started getting kind of depressed around 13, 14, I really had no idea what was going on. And when there's developmental trauma, you're delayed in some ways.
Mm,
So I really had no idea what was going on. I expressed it a lot, and then eventually I finally ended up in a psychiatrist's office, and I got misdiagnosed with, like, it's called schizoaffective disorder.
yes.
And I think a lot of people with complex trauma have actually been given that diagnosis. So
Mm,
for 7 years, I kind of floated. I tried my best, but I was on like 600 milligrams of Seroquel. I was on Lamotrigine.
mm,
Think I was on an antidepressant. So many medications. So
mm.
back like for I would say a good 7 year period, there were no good coping skills. I just kind of floated.
Yeah.
Like I was still able to kind of go to work, and I volunteered with like church kids. So I ran a little youth ministry for a few years. So that period, there really wasn't like I would just eat sugar all night. I was so I was very chubby back then. So
Yeah.
back then I had no coping skills at all.
Yeah.
But I would say, except just the determination to keep trying.
Yes.
Like I went to church, so you hear those Bible passages about all things work together for good. So
Yeah.
there was some determination to be like, I will figure out something that will work. But I was so brain fogged from the Seroquel, you get kind of stuck.
I was
But
just gonna say when you said six and I was on a lot of Seroquel as well, and it's
oh yeah.
really drowsy and you eat. I was hungry all the time. Like I me too. I was like a lot bigger back
So
then.
much sugar. And it makes you just crave sugar and you sleep like 15 hours and you just, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I would wake up with wrappers all over my body. Like you just like brush off the Kit Kat wrappers and go back to work. And I was, 17, 18, 19. When you're kind of a late teenager, early 20s, that's really discouraging. Like you see
Yes.
your body getting bigger, but you're not really getting better. So it was
Mm,
I mean, back then I would pray, I would go to church, I would try to exercise. Like I would do my best and I would write a lot of music and kind of sit there and be like, someday we'll figure out something. So
yeah.
I sort of I had some coping skills, like enough positive self-talk that we will figure something out. Because I was quite
Mm,
suicidal at the time, which is quite a normal reaction to that kind of experience.
yes.
But it was definitely around 2018 or so when I actually decided to start opening up to friends about my diagnosis. A lot of people are shocked. They're like, no, that doesn't seem like an
Yeah.
accurate thing. So it was when I kind of started reaching out to people, and people started kind of reaffirming a more positive outlook, I got way more motivated. But even that took a lot of work because I had to fight with doctors to like to get like a second opinion. So
Yeah.
long story short, I was able to do that. And I think once I got a diagnosis as a complex trauma, things started to change. Because then people were saying, oh, this might not be like as chronic as you think, or
Yes.
maybe even as hopeless as you think, right? You
Yeah.
might, I had a good psychologist that he said you might just need some good skills. Like we need to teach you how to regulate some emotions. We need to get you exercising. We need to get you eating vegetables. It was really just basic things like that. And
Mm.
then yeah, and that changed something in me. I was like, oh, so this could actually get a little bit better if I worked. And then
Yeah.
if that kind of got me going. But it was a lot of work because when you're kind of that overweight and that sick and you're falling behind on a lot of skills, like
Mm.
basic things. I didn't have a high school diploma and I'm
Mm.
23, so you're like, oh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things in your head, but I just kind of started slow. Like I remember one time my therapist said, "If you want to eat a chocolate bar, you eat a carrot." So I remember one night eating eating a carrot instead of a chocolate bar, and I was so proud of myself. It's so funny. You're sitting in bed, you're like, "This is a disgusting carrot," but we're trying.
It's fine.
We're trying. So it
But
was things like that. It was really kind of meeting people that understood trauma. That was definitely the first step to getting positive coping habits. And
yeah.
then the next step was just taking these little small changes. So you just one night you eat a carrot instead of a chocolate bar. You go
Yeah.
for a 30-second walk if that's all you can do.
Yeah.
And then you try to get some kind of support system to kind of reaffirm you because you need that like, yeah, you ate a carrot instead of a Kit Kat. And
Yeah.
that was really what it was finding a support network and making really small changes at the
Yeah.
start.
To celebrate this. This is beautiful. Yeah. And it's in a way, it's very inspiring actually, considering you were like in your teenage years, all you got is a diagnosis and a lot of medication, and no one actually giving you any telling you that, hey, if you there's actually some tools or some skills that you can learn to help you manage your emotions, because I was extremely depressed in my teenage years as well. And there's not enough support for teenagers, I feel. Or I didn't get support like you. and then,
Oh, there's definitely not enough. Yeah,
yeah. But it's
yeah,
just,
and I
it feels like you said, it's such a relief when you then actually have a professional who tells you there's actually something that you can do. It sparks some hope, doesn't it? It's like, oh, there's some skills that I can learn. There's people that I can support me through this.
and that's what it was because when you get a diagnosis like schizoaffective, it's basically just like we manage your symptoms. That's kind of more what it felt like.
Yeah.
So then you kind of deteriorate. But when
Mm.
it's things like when you're having panic attacks and they say, oh, well, this is trauma related, and there's things we can do to your body, it's
Yes.
a whole different ball game, right? You're like, oh, if there's even if there's not maybe a cure, if there's some way we can alleviate this and
Yes.
make it better, it's like it's way different.
It's manageable, because there's a thing, because you said you didn't finish high school, but life has really changed because you are now at university, aren't you? So
Oh yeah. Well, I finished high school within a year, and then I got a 2-year diploma in 1 year, working 3 jobs, and then that diploma and that high school gave me the ability to get into university. So like within 3 years, and I'm talking like 70, like I was working 70-hour weeks. It was really intense. It was super intense.
yes.
Like not necessarily ideal, but it was kind of what I had to do
Yeah.
to just like to kind of close a lot of developmental gaps
Yeah.
and kind of catch back up. And I
Yeah.
feel that now that I'm in university and I have a bit of skills built up, like I would say the chaos is so calmed down. There's still a little bit here and there, but compared to where I was 3 years ago, it's a whole different arena that I'm in now.
Yeah. And maybe you would like to share a little bit, because I know that you're a junior studying music, because I checked your music out. I find it really touching, like to hear your music. And for anyone who's interested, I'll put the links down below if you want to check out Andrew's music. It's just so, yeah, you can feel the emotions through the music. So maybe did them actually creating those songs help you on your healing journey as well, do you think?
Oh, it was so like when I sit down and just start writing how I'm feeling, there's something about that. It's like, when you talk to somebody and you feel better, and I feel so much better. And then sometimes, and then kind of sharing that with other people also, it's kind of like a reciprocal thing. So I write the song and I make it, and it's like, oh, I made this thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things, because I do like parts therapy with my EMDR, there's certain parts of you that get kind of fragmented. So I have all these songs represent maybe a part of me that just wants to speak and be heard. So when I listen to a song of mine now, it's like, oh yeah, this is a specific, you get the negative core beliefs. Like this song is what defective Andrew wrote.
Yeah.
And there's something like you feel like you overcame something, and now you have this beautiful piece of art to represent what you overcame. There's something about that that feels really good. And you feel that in your body too, like singing or playing piano, which is what I like to do. There's something about you're pushing that energy out, but you're turning into something nice sounding. So it's like all this like nasty emotional energy is coming out into something like much more beautiful.
Yeah.
And then I do find sometimes I'll see something. Well, for instance, I had one person stream my whole album for 4 hours once a few months ago. I'm like, man, I don't know who that person was or what was going on, but they clearly needed 4 hours of that EP. And there's something about that that also feels really good too. It's
Yeah.
like, man, yeah, I'm happy I could be there for you, but
Yeah.
wow. Man.
There is some, I know some of my friends really dislike it, and that's why I use headphones for it. But when I'm really distressed or when I was still really depressed, there were certain songs and I would put that on repeat, and I would literally listen, like you said, 4 hours, 5 hours, that song would run on repeat. And there was something calming and soothing, because that way my life was structured in 3.5 minute intervals, kind of thing. It's like it becomes predictable. I know there's something about this repetitiveness of a song that I found really soothing, but I know it drives other crazy. That's why wear headphones.
That's amazing. And if you have like an attachment wound, there's something about it's stirring up that chaos, but you've got a verse, a chorus, another verse, a bridge. Like it's this secure little piece of work that's like pulling all your dysregulation out. Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah. There's something about that that I find. And I'll do that too. I'll work on a specific issue with my therapist for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then I'll record a song that represents all of what we worked on.
Yes.
Like I have one song called Home, and it was about the first time I started to feel like I was at home with people again. So
Yes.
the whole song is just, and sometimes I'll replay it and I'll listen to that and I'll think of the people that inspired it. And there's just something about that feeling of having a home that people with trauma can really relate to. Because even when you finally surround yourself with people that are affirming you, you don't quite feel right. You feel like it's almost like if you're a duck and you're trying to hang out with a bunch of like swans or something, right? Like you're like, I'm with these people, but I'm not the same. I wasn't like, there's something about that. But when you can kind of bridge that gap and start to feel at home in healthy relationships, so then I'll take that and I'll write a song about it. And I feel that. And then you can go to sleep and you can think, oh, somebody could be listening to this at 3 a.m. and I'm just in bed sleeping. And it's almost like passive helping people. There's something about it that's just really beautiful, I find, with art.
Yeah, there's definitely, and that music is so powerful. I feel, yeah, like, because so often when we're struggling, there isn't really words to express it, but then you hear a song, and to me it's like, oh my gosh, this person is feeling the same as me. I can feel it in the music, and I'm drawn to that, and it's like it feels like I'm not alone, because if someone writes that song, they know what it's like to be in that emotion. So it's,
They went through it and they found a way to bring it out.
yeah, yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's
I can't write music, but I love listening to music. So
yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah, I recommend anybody, even if you're not maybe skilled at music, taking like some kind of songwriting course or some kind of lesson. And even if you can just play really simple stuff, there's something about just sitting there and using just a few fingers and making a little bit of sound that it feels so good.
it is.
Yeah.
I noticed I was just talking to another friend who said that it's more music therapy is actually a thing now, and it is more incorporated in certain not many, but some hospital have programs in the outpatient centers and stuff like that where they incorporate music now, like playing drums, I think it was, and something. It's that it is powerful to be able to express emotions that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the music therapy field is going to continue to grow as we understand more how to use the sounds and how to kind of manipulate frequencies for
Yeah.
certain effects. I think so. I one of my professional life, I work with people that have autism spectrum disorder, and music has been shown to be one of those things that it helps kids regulate if they have like autism or ADHD. There's something about the music that helps them regulate. I think as we explore that more, we're going to be using it all over the place.
Absolutely. They talk about that at the trauma conferences as well. You probably know that more than I do. But there's certainly, even the chanting, that the sound, that sound that start lower, they vibrate lower in your body.
Oh yeah.
And those vibrations actually are very, very soothing, apparently.
It is. I attend a Ukrainian church on Sundays, and their whole liturgy they chant the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I found that about 5 months ago, and there's something about that that I feel really regulated when I leave. I can feel that,
Yeah.
and everybody, yeah, there's something about, and even no instruments, it's just the human voice, and everybody's making harmony together, and I feel very regulated after that.
Yes. Yeah.
We need more.
So true. You don't have to be a singer. You can even just hum, isn't it? There's that when you really connect it with your body and you're just humming, you can feel the I don't know, there's a little
Feel
vibration
that.
in your body. Yeah, it's
Well, I remember one of the exercises I learned was actually something like you go
yes,
and
yes,
and yeah, sometimes when I do that, I feel because I have the tension in my head, you feel the little cracks. You
yes,
can feel your brain like cracking.
yeah,
It's really interesting. All the little tensions popping out.
yeah. It's really and growling like a bear and things like that. It's like it's and it's funny. I had the biggest resistance to it. I could not get myself growl like a bear in front of people. I was embarrassed. I was like, I couldn't do it. I was
I know what you mean.
and
Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
and kids
In classical,
so free. Children just do that naturally, isn't it? They make those animal sounds and they probably know how good it feels. And we adults have all sorts of things about it.
oh,
Yeah.
I know. I was hanging out with a cousin the other day, and he has this little son who was like running around like a puppy dog, and I'm like, man, I miss when I could do that and not be like, oh no.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of my big focuses for a long time on my journey to bring that more childlike energy into my healing, to have more fun, because there was a big part of my life, but it was that joy and that fun and that playfulness and the curiosity. It wasn't there, so yeah, to make
You
up.
need that, and you should never lose that anyways. You always you want to mature and be an adult, all that stuff, but you want to keep that child spirit
Yes,
all the time. Like
yes,
that imaginative, creative spirit. You want to keep that with you all the time.
yes, yeah, beautiful. It's so yeah, so inspiring. So I'm so was there anything else you would like to share?
Yeah, I would like to share it because
Please?
I know EMDR is a very popular topic right now. And I've been doing EMDR for 2.5 years now, like
Yeah,
forms of EMDR, and I think that would be really interesting for people to hear about those experiences. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, so I can just, yeah, I'll just go ahead and share. I started EMDR, well, in 2020, I was actually doing counseling for about 8 or 9 months. And my counselor, God bless him, wasn't actually trained in EMDR yet. But I was having so many body symptoms, like I was dissociating my body. I was having what they call, I think the term is psychosomatic seizure. So sometimes my body would be shaking like I was having a seizure. And
Mhm.
they would last about 20 minutes, some of the episodes. So I
Wow.
would do that and then I would go to work. Sometimes on a work break, I would go find
Yeah,
even like a forest or something and you just
yeah,
they're quite painful, but so I was
yeah.
having all kinds of reactions like that. My head would start shaking and I was having nightmares and what they call trance episodes where you black out. So I was
Mm,
having some very severe symptoms. So he one time said, I'm looking into EMDR training. Would you like to be my patient because they train as somebody. So I
mm,
thought, let's do it. Because I'd been seeing him for almost a year, and I
yeah.
he's a great therapist, and I didn't want to just start over. So we started that together in December 2020, and it's been a wild ride. So I know some people might not know the EMDR, but you kind of pick a memory that's traumatic, and I would kind of sit there, and he does this bilateral stimulation
Yeah,
and then my body reprocesses it. That's a very like simple way to explain it. But
yeah.
we haven't even started that part because there's a type of trauma called like dissociative disorder not otherwise specified, which is where I fall into.
Yeah.
So for the last, I would say year and a half, I've been doing what they call parts work.
Yeah.
So we take because when you have enough different traumatic experiences, all your parts kind of fragment. So you have maybe like, oh, this is kind Andrew over here, and this is ugly Andrew from when I was overweight. This is like defective Andrew, and this is so there's so many different kind of parts that you end up. And for people with that kind of complex PSD like me, if you get triggered, you're not just dissociating, but you're actually switching into like an alternate part.
Mm,
So that's where we started with EMDR right away, but it was too like I would get too flooded, they call it.
yes.
So that's yeah, and that happens to a lot of people. And I
Yeah.
actually think a lot of people start EMDR and quit because it's doing that. But
Mm,
there's so many different approaches. So I'm at what they call the parts work. So we actually kind of work with the different parts. So
yeah.
we do like we do like grounding exercises
Yes.
and then we'll purposely call to mind a specific part. And I'll talk there and we'll work out whatever I needed to say when I was 8 years old and something happened. I just say it and then whatever emotional reaction I need to have, I will. So if
Mm,
it's crying or having a psychosomatic seizure, whatever it needs to be, you just do it, and that actually that kind of resolves all the parts. And I find that
mm,
helps. I'll notice basically instant results for that. And the long-term goal is basically we put all the parts back together, and
yes.
then we can do the EMDR processing. And then after that, the goal is like I'm basically in remission. So
Yeah.
that's the long, but it's a long process. I've been in it for 2.5 years. So it's a long commitment, but if I compare 2 years ago having, I would say 5 panic attacks a day, at least one psychosomatic seizure a day and nightmares and I wasn't sleeping,
Mm,
it's been worth the effort. I would definitely recommend you do it.
yes. Wow.
And the effects on the body, like people laugh at this, but it's hard to see, but I got like one white eyebrow. So there's all these things. It's amazing what the stress does to the body, like
Yeah.
like premature aging and all kinds. So you want to just go take care of that.
Mm,
Definitely.
and I
And
would,
EMDR definitely is one of those things that I think people are still learning about it, but like people are still learning that it's an option, but I would definitely recommend anybody with complex trauma should be looking into it because it's like it's so effective. At least in my case, I found like night and day.
yeah.
I'll leave a session and it's like an instant change has occurred. It's
Mm.
amazing.
And I like the way you pointed out that, you know, you've already worked with that therapist for a while before you started that new, so you already had a relationship with it. And I think this is so key to any approach, whether this is parts therapy or whether this is EMDR. It doesn't really matter. You need to have a relationship, and I need that feeling. I trust this person. I you know, there's something I resonate with. I want to continue to see, because like you said, it's a process, right? But you're committed to it, and
Oh, it's a long commitment, and if you don't get along, if you don't have a good therapeutic relationship, it won't work the same way.
yeah,
And sometimes it's not your fault or their fault. Sometimes personalities or like styles just don't work together. But when you find that one that really works, it's worth it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I've been with mine. I could still go back. I haven't had a session for a long time, but it was I think about 8 years, at least.
Oh yeah.
It was more like 10 years that we have very regular, just about weekly sessions. You know, it's like you have that one person, and that relationship is so important, because the interpersonal trauma is all about relationships. That part of us has never been able to fully develop, to feel safe in a relationship, to able to trust that person is actually going to support me and has my best interest at heart, right? And it really has to be the right therapist to do that, and someone who's in tune enough, like you said, who noticed that EMDR was a bit too much at that point, so you went back to do some more parts therapy. So this is a therapist that's very in tune, and that's all really good signs to have someone like that. It's beautiful.
Oh yeah, and you know, it's sometimes we're not very good at judging when we have a complex trauma. We sometimes pick people that aren't good, but
Yes.
there's so many things like that like, oh yeah, this is a really like, oh no, this is, or if I'm having too much trouble getting something done, it's like, oh no, it's okay. It's not a rush to do this. And yeah, we have this thing in my relationship where it's like we talk, even how we talk about progress, we're very careful with using words like we use a word like progress because we don't want to get too attached to the idea of like
Yeah.
attaining a certain goal. Because
Yeah.
sometimes we think with trauma recovery, it's like, oh, I'm gonna fix myself, and then I'm gonna get
That was
married, and I'm gonna go to school. Yeah, I'm gonna go to school. I remember when I
me.
was first all gung ho about trauma recovery, I had a whole, I was like, I'm gonna completely heal over the summertime, and then I'm gonna get a girlfriend and go to school in the fall. And I'm like, the 3 month timeline didn't work. This time we'll do 5. I remember going to counseling and they're like, no, no, we don't put timelines in.
Oh, it was so funny you said that. I had the same thing. I think my timeline was, yeah, by the end of the year. It was like it
But
needs.
that's better. I was 3 months. I was like, okay, between June and August, we're gonna completely heal.
Yeah.
Then
I,
September 1st comes, you're like, why am I still crying in my car? I had 2 months.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm laughing about it now, but I wasn't. I was very serious about this in that moment. I really wanted to be healed and have my brain that quickly. I thought, otherwise, what's the point in living? Kind of thing. It was that drastic for me. You know, my
Yeah, it's funny you get stuck on this idea that like people who aren't traumatized just never have a like never even have a bad emotion. I
yes,
remember being shocked that even after I feel so much better, I'll still get upset during tax season or things like that. I'm like, I'm supposed to be healed. Why am I grumpy about tax season? And then
yeah,
you're like, oh, everybody gets grumpy this week. Okay.
yeah,
But things like that, I remember it was kind of my perception of that was a little bit distorted. I'm like, I'm gonna heal and I'm never gonna have a bad mood ever again. Like, oh my
yeah,
gosh. It's interesting. But then part of healing is you kind of learn how to accept even things like I know when I lost a lot of weight, body, like I thought I would lose weight and be completely fine with my body after that. But then you just find you're like, oh no, now I have stretch marks and now I have loose skin. Oh, my eyebrow just turned white. Like we get kind of these ideas that we're going to get to a certain point. So it's
yeah,
kind of learning how to live with, like you want to recover and you want to be very well regulated, but you also need to learn how to live with some things not being quite right.
yes,
It's like some people ask me if I would dye my eyebrow, and I'm like, no, we don't. Like, if
yeah,
my eyebrow wants to be white, it's just gonna be white now, you know? Like, whatever.
yeah.
It's a, it's
It
learning how
is,
to live with a little bit of things
yes,
because you get kind of stuck in the idea that if you're not perfect, you're like a complete mess, right?
It's
It's
very
like anything under
white.
100% is a
Mm.
fail. Yeah, complete black and white. So I've noticed one of the biggest signs that I'm really healing is that I can live with a little bit of like normal, not perfect stuff.
Yes.
Even relationships, I have some friends now that there's certain amount of maybe imperfections that I'm accepting of now. Whereas before I thought, no, no, there can't be anything wrong with me or anybody. Like that person just said something passive aggressive. That means they're an abuser. Like, whereas like no, sometimes people just get tired and they make a comment about what, like you kind
Yeah.
of. I notice as I heal more, I'm kind of learning what's acceptable and what's not, like in every realm of life.
Yeah.
And yeah, especially in relationships, that's the hardest part, learning like, okay, how much imperfection can I or other people have before it's a problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it instantly triggers that I'm not safe, isn't it? I need other people, even the therapist. I wanted that therapist to be perfect because otherwise, it's not safe going there if that, yeah.
Oh yeah, and I remember that happened with me, and that actually where it became most healing. I remember the first time I ever told my therapist, like, what you said made me upset, and then you're like, okay, all right, they're gonna tell me to get out of here, and then they understand you, and you're like, oh, I
Yeah.
remember being so shocked because you're just like expecting, you're
Yes.
like the most, yeah,
Be
you're like, oh no,
rejected. Yeah.
I just set up a mild boundary. This is the end of everything, and then they're like, oh, okay. Yeah, and I remember that with some of them because I formed some very healthy friendships, and the first few times I was like, no, I actually don't want to do that. You're like, okay, I'm not listening to whatever you're gonna say, and they're like, oh yeah, that's totally fine. It's like, oh, I spent a whole week preparing for the worst, and you're like, that's fine. So I think,
Mm,
yeah. So it
yeah.
is like this is so funny the healing, the process. And that's where I've had to learn too. You get once you know you're breaking out of the cycles when you can kind of accept like there's certain imperfections that are allowed and then certain things like really serious boundary crossing, like if somebody's being inappropriate with you or they're saying horrible things to you or that they won't change a negative behavior or even discuss. Like there's certain things you start to realize right away.
Yeah.
It's like if you eat something that tastes bad, and you're like, "Ooh, that's gross to me." But it takes a long time to be able to see the nuances in relationships. Yeah.
And do not be so triggered and take it so personally, isn't it? Like you said, maybe that person's just having a bad day and they're tired and they didn't actually mean it that way as it comes out and the way I interpreted it.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because when you have any kind of trauma, a lot of times that's part of the relationship pattern, right? People will say things and then not talk to you for 3 weeks. So you're always thinking like that this is what's happening, and then
Yeah. Everything was
yeah.
like if I would walk in the room and that person didn't really look up and say hello to me, it was like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong about me. But really, that was so caught up in their mind about something that just happened that they were still processing that had nothing to do,
Oh, I know.
you know.
Oh, I know what you mean. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. One
yeah,
of the best ways I kind of learned that was just by like not testing people because you want to be careful doing that, but I would just practice like just saying how I felt and that's how I kind of determined. But even that took a lot of courage for me to even just to say how I felt, even over small things like would you like sugar in your coffee? And you're like, I don't know what the right answer is.
yeah. Oh wow, I
Or
can
did you
so
like the
relate.
food? You're like,
Yeah.
how honest can I be? Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Especially when you're invited into someone else's home and would you like a cup of coffee or something? It's like, should I say yes or no? What's the right answer here? It's like,
Oh my gosh. I remember the first time I ever, because sometimes people will be like, oh, help yourself to seconds if you want. I remember the first time I was at a friend's house and I actually helped myself to seconds without like asking again. And you're like, oh, we're crossing mountains that no man has ever crossed. You're like, oh my gosh. But that was how I started. It took me a while to even to get to the point where I could do simple things like that. But that's at one point when I really wanted to know, are these healthy relationships? I would
Yes.
do small things like that, like, oh, they said I could help myself to more if I want, so I would just go do it and see what happened.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's
and then
so
eventually,
beautiful that you got through that and that you feel home. And then you actually created a song called Home about this. So that's really touching.
oh,
Just,
exactly. And then when I show that song to people and be like, well, you've inspired this lyric, it's like there's something about that that's really beautiful.
yeah.
And it's so funny. I remember like you go home and you're crying in your car because you had like a second helping and nobody judged you. And you're so embarrassed about it. You're like, I can't believe I'm sobbing about this.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. But
Inspiration.
that's kind of the reality if you have like complex trauma, even things that seem so small to a lot of people, they're like big mountains for you to climb over.
Yes. Yeah. Very true. That's so true. And especially, I don't know, is there something that you would like to share for people who also have those seizures, those is it pseudo
Oh yeah, psychosomatic seizures.
things? It's such a long, complex name for this, but because I have a friend who also has them, and I noticed that it's really complex because when you have them, especially around other people, and they look like seizures, and like I said, they can be quite painful. So do you
Oh,
have?
they're quite painful. And I know like because I can't give clinical advice per se, but I remember before I knew what they were, and there was a time where I couldn't afford therapy. I was working full time. So I remember when I couldn't afford therapy, I would just have to do positives. Like I would start breathing through my nose, like squeezing pillows and things like that. I'm a Christian, so I would recite some prayers and Bible verses. But I
Yes.
remember just telling myself, like, we are going to get enough money and we're going to go get a counselor and
Yeah.
like we're gonna get, and you just like you really have to, and then maybe hugging yourself is a really good thing to do.
Mm.
I mean, doing that deep breathing and trying to feel your body is I think the best. And having tools in place, like you have pillows that you can grab or you wrap yourself in a blanket.
Yeah.
I mean, the best. And then as soon as that thing is over, you get on that Google and you try to find some kind of person that, like an EMDR specialist,
Yeah.
because those definitely they need some kind of medical intervention. But
Yeah.
when you're having them and you don't know what they are, I think the most important thing is to just know that they're normal. Because I
Mm.
remember I would go on YouTube and I found out about them from YouTubers,
Yeah.
and that helped me kind of like having the awareness that this was a normal thing helped
Mm.
me until I was able to afford therapy again.
Yeah.
Because that's the first few times it ever happened, I had no idea what was happening.
Yeah.
So you're like, am I dying? Like, what is going on here? I remember having one where like I dissociated and my body was shaking, and then I
Yeah.
had to just go to work right after it. And you go to work and you're like, what just happened? And
Yeah.
so I found out about them on YouTube,
Yeah.
and then I was like, okay, so these happen to people with trauma. So the best thing to do is I need to get to like a trauma therapist at some point. So that was the thing that helped. And then just breathing through my nose, like really deep, getting that, like the square breathing, especially when you breathe in and count to four.
Yeah.
And then you hold your breath for 4 seconds, and then you breathe out counting to four. You hold your
Mm.
breath for 4 seconds.
Yes.
And then soothing music and drinking tea and doing my best to work. And then, I mean, back in those days, I would take an afternoon off and just nap for 3 hours. It's not necessarily functional, but at the time, it served a purpose because your body just, it needs to get all that out.
Mm.
So you do everything you can, and then you do your best to access whatever resources you can find,
Mm.
online resources. You
Yeah.
you find some friends because you need people to kind of support your body through it with you, especially people. And the EMDR actually has made those stop almost completely. I
Wow.
still get them, yeah, I still get them sometimes very mildly, but they've almost completely gone away now.
That's
So
good.
I know it's so encouraging. I
Yeah.
think I think that's the best thing you can do. You need to kind of support your body through it, but getting to some kind of professional intervention is definitely the best option to make them go away.
Mm.
And finding like ways to comfort yourself
Yeah,
while you're building up your resources.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's very inspirational, really, that knowing that you were very determined, like you really went for it, like you had to work hard to actually earn the money to pay for the therapists and things like that. So there's a lot of determination and drivenness there within you. But it actually it does work when we find the right therapist. Things do change, not in the 2 or 3 months that we hoped for, but
But that over time, and that's the thing, you think like you don't want to work, you don't want to try too hard because it's painful, but short term it was like I would not recommend working 3 jobs, but I
yes,
didn't have a lot of education, so I just did what I had to do.
yeah,
But I mean, now it was worth it. It was brutally stressful at the time, but being able to afford some therapy and now I feel my body has calmed down so much. And
mm,
I'm still a little bit of ways, but I'm doing EMDR as long as I need to. But it's that like
yeah,
it's just allowing yourself to feel that pain while you're working hard, knowing that on the other side it would be a lot easier. I
yeah,
definitely don't miss working 3 jobs and like how chaotic that was, but it was worth it. It was really worth all the effort. Because if I hadn't done that, I would still be where I was 2 years ago, probably having psychosomatic seizures 3 times a day, and like
yeah,
I would probably be in a worse state. So
yeah,
it was short term, it was very hard to put that much effort into it, but I mean, the rest of my life is going to be a lot better because I did that. So
yeah.
that's the thing. You want to you have to be able to accept that short term
Mm,
pain so you can get kind of a more positive long term outcome.
mm,
I know it's hard when you're in the moment because you're like, when you're so triggered that it's hard to go to work, you can't even imagine working more than 3 hours. I remember that I would be at work the whole day and I'd be like, oh, I just want to go home, but I have an evening shift at my other job. And
yes.
it's brutal. It's not, it's hard. That's why
Yeah.
you need to find at least 1 or 2 people. I remember I found these people who became like parents to me that they would have me over every Sunday for coffee. I was
Yes.
able to tell them I'm having these awful psychosomatic seizures and I'm in EMDR, but it costs me like 700 a month and I'm trying to pay rent on time and eat food.
Yeah.
And they would have me, so I would have that to look forward to every Sunday. Okay, every Sunday I'm going to go over to this place. There's going to be coffee. I don't have to
Mm,
pay for groceries that day. Oh my gosh. So I think you need something, everybody needs to find somebody like that.
mm. That's good, isn't it? Yeah. The therapist is one thing, but that's only the 1 hour a week, isn't it? To have that support system outside of therapy as well, even if it's just the one person, like you said, or two, to have that coffee on a Sunday. It makes
Oh,
all
and you need that.
that. Yeah.
And I know it depends on what country people live in, but I know I live in Canada and there's like
Yeah.
I was able to go get help paying for my college diploma because I was so low income and had a disability. So depending on what country, but you don't realize I live in this country with all these resources and you get so stuck in your trauma, you're like, there's no help, there's no. But I remember I found some resources like that. I'm like, oh, there are, because
Yeah.
I thought I wouldn't be able to go to school, but I found a resource and I worked hard. I kind of pushed through the school.
Yeah.
So I would say, depending on where you are, people need to kind of see what those resources are because a lot of people, well, even like you and I, will start
Mm,
foundations and organizations because we're all kind of trying to pull each other up.
yeah.
So that's the biggest thing, not to get kind of stuck in there's no hope for me and like, oh, I don't come from money, so education's not even an option. And because I
Yeah.
know I could not have afforded an education, but because of resources, I was able to access care.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't able to access a lot of therapeutic care, I was able to get some of my other needs met through various resources, which helped me keep paying for therapy. So I didn't have
Yeah.
to relate.
It's becoming resourceful, isn't it? To look around because those things are not very well advertised in a way. You have to really talk to people and allow yourself to be open that, hey, I actually need support around, to fund the college for me. And the more you talk to people, eventually you meet someone who knows an avenue or something for you. It's allowing But it is so hard as a trauma survivor to actually let other people support you, or, you know, to have that receiving something. It's like, when I don't feel worthy, is it? Should someone else have it before me? You know, so
Well, depending on what your beliefs are, you might think, oh, well, people who access care, I remember thinking they were a burden on the system because that's what I grew up believing. Because that's what I heard a lot. Like, oh, these people drain the system dry. So I remember when I was first accepting help, I'm like, oh no, I'm
yeah.
one of the dream.
So,
You're like, yeah, we're just gonna try it.
mm,
And even accessing resources is a skill. It's like learning how to sing or learning how to ride a bike is a skill, but knowing that there's resources and knowing how to send a proper email to access them is also a skill
yeah.
that you don't learn. If you need that, you probably don't have the skill to know how to access it, unfortunately. So I think even just knowing that they're out there is a first step to learning the skill and then
Mm,
just kind of exploring. And sometimes it's hard. You get so I remember trying to write college essays and having panic attacks as soon as I started writing an essay. So there's things that happen in your body that are just preventing you from accessing these things. So
mm,
it sounds so easy to just say, oh well, there's resources on the internet that you can find, but it's actually quite difficult when you're in that headspace.
absolutely. So glad to
That's why it's like I
hear
said with the carrot, like you take just tonight we're just gonna eat a carrot instead of sugar and
that.
I think accessing resources, maybe tonight you'll just Google resources and whatever your city name is, and then you just leave it. I would do that a lot too. Or
Yeah.
at Access, I would just Google education grants and then get triggered and walk away.
Yes.
Like, okay, we're gonna go scroll YouTube for an hour now and come back
Yeah.
to that when we're ready. Oh my
And
gosh.
I think sometimes it can help when we have a bigger vision, like you going to uni and doing your music. Like I said, you're working with children who have autism and connecting with them. But if I actually finish that degree, the more I know, the better I can help those children, and the more music I can create, that other trauma survivors might actually help, you know, spark something for them and inspire them or get them through dark moments. So there's something really beautiful about this. You know, you are, yes, you're getting money for that, but you're also contributing a lot with that. It just, you know,
It's
it's,
so purposeful. There's like this economy that so you're not just fighting for yourself, now you're fighting for everybody. And there is
yeah,
something about that. Like I'm fighting for the kids I work with and the people. This, yes, it's what you just said. There is something about that, like, because you start to get almost, it's not like a negative selfish thing, but you start to get closed in a little bit. So if you can force yourself to stretch out, and then
yes,
as you're stretching out, people are stretching you out with you.
yes, yes,
It's makes a
beautiful.
big difference. And some of the most supportive people in my life are people that have children with autism or children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder because
Yes,
they'll maybe see the work I'm doing in their community and then they see I'm struggling too. So
yes,
then it was actually the person who got me into college. I work with her children that all have fetal alcohol syndrome. So there is something about that community. You're working, they're working, and everybody kind of, as they see needs in other people, they do whatever they can to fill that need.
yes. And your ability to connect with those children with that, because that is a developmental delay as well that they're having, just in a different scale, I guess. But the ability to connect with them is so different, so much more in tune in that sense with the music. You know, it's like having that
Oh
all
yeah, and
walking
having like
through that. Yeah.
and having some trauma background, you relate to that. And I actually, interestingly, I used to have pretty bad Tourette syndrome, which actually also went away with the EMDR, which was very interesting. But so like when I see autistic children that are also twitchy or kids with ADHD, it's like, oh yeah, like I've been around that block. But for some reason, when I did started doing the EMDR stuff, my Tourette's went away, which was very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
I read about that on your website. See, I did check out your music and
You did your research, nice.
because I'm
Yeah, it's just very because I used to have tick like I would be doing this all the time. So I remember it was it was very weird. I mean, people would be like, "What happened to your Tourette's?" And it's
yeah,
like, it
yeah.
just went away. Like, yeah.
Wow. Isn't that interesting that even that? was probably a trauma response or something, or that having your nervous system so dysregulated that now having different tools and different approaches available, that
I think so, because when you get like, especially my worst tick was like this neck thing. And sometimes when I get triggered, my neck is the first thing to feel tension. So back when there was no way for the tension to go out, I think, and I remember I tried a therapy program for Tourette's, and it worked really well. But he said something interesting. He said, "I think your eye thing is the only one that's real Tourette's. The other one seems like more like a compulsive behavior." Which that actually, just that one word actually triggered me thinking, oh, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
But yeah, and I read about that somewhere else that a young woman around my age had the same thing. She had Tourette's, but she was saying she thought it might be related. And I can see that. And I wouldn't say it is in all cases, but in my case, it seemed to be like that tension just had nowhere to go. So it
Mm.
would end up in funny body movements.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure Peter Levine talks about that in one of his books or videos. Because he does all the psychosomatic kind of there's that one video where I think it's a veteran that he had some sort of movement or some tick with his body as well, and how he helped him through that with therapy. And I can't
Oh yeah, I watched that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a trauma response too, but this isn't quite the same kind of tick as you would have as a when you have Tourette's. It's or even the seizures, the yours was a lot more. It's different, I think. You think?
Yeah, it seems to be quite different for everybody. And mine, yeah, my Tourette's, as I started to heal, it just started to go away over time, which was really, and it's such a relief too, because those are also uncomfortable. I know, I just know some people that I meet that still have Tourette's, and it's like, oh man, I feel that. I do not miss having to do that all the time. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I wish I asked you that earlier on and I forgot about that part. So I'm hoping all the way till the end. So if you're still here with us.
You just put it in the clickbait.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll have to mention that because I think so many people feel like when certain condition, this is like a life sentence. This is I was diagnosed with that and I have that for the rest of my life. I was even told that for PTSD, that these symptoms that I have, this is like a lifelong thing. But we know so much more now. So much has changed. The neuroscience and how they talk about neuroplasticity and all the theory and the vagus nerve and the somatic healing and all these kind of things that we know now. There's so many conditions. So like you said, they just kind of resolve as you resolve the trauma, they just kind of fade away. They go in the background, they disappear. So
It's kind of amazing, yeah. And I imagine as we continue develop our knowledge, there's going to be a lot of disorders that go off the chronic list, and
yeah,
maybe there'll be like some outliers that stay there. But I mean, even like my Tourette's is maybe a case by case, but at least in one case we know that it was connected and it was resolved, which is
yeah,
really fascinating.
it is. They keep
Super.
sharing that. So it's to spark hope for people that these things can actually resolve. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's worth a try. I mean, you accept whatever happens, but if you and like you don't want to treat that as the cure, but you just resolve the trauma and whatever positive effects happen, it's just
Yes.
like, yeah, you just go with it. Just I remember as my
Yeah.
stress was going away, you're just like, wow, I was not expecting that part, but there we go.
I think that's what it is. If you go into therapy expecting it to go away and wanting this, like we said initially, I wanted to have that brain fixed and stuff. The more we want a certain outcome, the less it's going to happen because we're trying to force it. But the more you actually just go in and you're trying to work on something different, and you weren't even thinking about the Tourette's when you were doing EMDR, or that
And
this
it's just going away, yeah.
happens, yeah, to allow that to happen, allow that to be a possibility for for whoever your listeners, whatever your conditions may be, like fibromyalgia and things like that. Those things do kind of disappear as people.
I've heard of that. Yeah, a lot of even arthritis, I've heard of people And I know like I have a sibling who's only 40 and already has arthritis, and you always wonder like because that's young to get it.
Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of things like that and even migraines, I still get the occasional migraine, but I mean I used to get 3 migraines a month, and now maybe every couple months I'll get a 30-minute partial migraine.
Yeah.
So even that,
Wow.
and sometimes if I have a migraine while I'm doing the EMDR, I can actually feel the migraine, whatever that tension is resolving too. So I think there's a lot of diseases and illnesses like that that are related to trauma.
Mm, mm. That is, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing all this kind of very vulnerable stuff with us, isn't it? It's not that easy to share all our struggles and the symptoms, but I think it is really inspirational, or it's going to spark some hope for people who are still in that situation, in the really dark places where they're really struggling. So beautiful.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you and sharing about it. I think it is super important because it was a lot of interviews like this that have really encouraged me back in the day when I was, because you're looking for that. You're like, did somebody, because you see a lot of trauma around you, and you're
Yeah.
like, okay, did somebody get out of it? And then you see at least one or two people, and you're like, okay, it can be done. And I think it's really important for people to talk about this kind of stuff because there's so many people that have attachment wounds like this and complex trauma, and it's very common. I think people need to see just kind of positive blueprints and positive outcomes that can come from it.
Yes.
I think it's important.
Yes, and you produced the music for us to help us along the way too. So I'll put those links down below too for you guys. So if you,
Yeah, and I'd love to see some comments or something. I want to see
yeah,
if any of my songs touched anybody. I would love to hear about it.
yeah, yes, and then we're going to put the links down below too. So if people want to reach out, or is there comment sections for the music on YouTube? Yes, of course. You
Yeah,
can.
of course. Yeah, go comment on my video. You can share your story on in the comment on my video
Yeah,
too. And I'll read it and I'll respond to it. And be
yes,
nice to hear from people.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Andrew, for making the time for us to share this story with us here today. So I really, really appreciate that. I think. Thank you.
You are very welcome, Tanya.